Ghost of Tsushima attempts to remedy many of the complaints that are leveled against open world games. It gets rid of the functionality of towers, it doesn't have hunting areas, and keeps the map fairly clear. By including NPCs that add side quests to the world, Tsushima feels alive in a way that others in the genre don't. With strong art direction and entertaining combat, it ends up being the best first-party open-world game on PS4, at least depending on your affinity for arachnids. That would have been the final paragraph in my dream review, detailing all of the intricacies that Ghost of Tsushima has to offer. Instead, I've been struggling to review this game because I feel constricted. While I have a lot to say about gameplay, sound, and the story, it's the looming shadow of that Metacritic score and other reviewers' thoughts that I can't escape from. A minority of people absolutely adore Ghost of Tsushima, and others chalk it up to just the latest open world offering. Parts of both of those perspectives I understand, but there's just so much happening in the middle that I can't do a straight-laced review. So get ready for something a little different. Imagine that there is a game, one filled with hunting spots for different animals, towers to climb, and collectibles to scavenge for. This open world game is rendered by a topographic map and has icons that litter the screen. I could either be talking about Far Cry or Horizon Zero Dawn. There are so many aspects to these games that people complain about, and yet Horizon Zero Dawn has an 89, and Far Cry 3, 4, and 5 have a 90, mid-80s, and low 80s respectively. Now, imagine a game whose map only has the most important icons on it, places of great interest. A game who prods the player to explore its world by trying to divert their attention away from the map. Having NPCs talk about the world and areas the player hasn't been to, enticing their curiosity of the unknowns yet to be discovered. I'm talking about Breath of the Wild, but I could also be describing Ghost of Tsushima. And yes, I know Breath of the Wild has towers, those pointy bastards aside, there is something really intriguing about the way Ghost of Tsushima tackles its open world. It really does limit what is on the map. Unlike in Ubisoft games and Horizon, whose map look nauseating, it has a very sparse feel. Each blip directly affects the player in some way, whether that's a town that can be traveled to or activities that grant permanent upgrades. While there are collectibles, they don't show up here, and there's no place to purchase a treasure map to add them. So no cluttered map, check off that grievance. Next is towers. Ghost of Tsushima doesn't have them. Done. How about when actually traversing? Well, the game's HUD is extremely minimal. Even when prompting the user, only a tiny portion of the screen is dedicated to ushering the player to their objective. Just like in that state of play, I'll reiterate that the wind is your guide, continually flowing towards your next destination. It's a pretty foreign system at first, but it becomes as easy as looking at foliage blowing in the wind, leaves fluttering to the ground, and of course the lines that the wind makes to orientate yourself. And while you're traveling, you might spot a bird to lead you to interest points, foxes to guide you, and people to save. In that state of play, the developers also talk about smoke billowing up into the air as another attempt to draw your attention, but this doesn't really become a factor until you finish the first third of the game, since you're mostly in forest up until that point. Ghost of Tsushima attempts to take lessons taught in Breath of the Wild and implement them here, trying to pique the player's interest to explore more. While not done as masterfully as Nintendo, it represents a step in the right direction. Another thing taken from Breath of the Wild is that every single icon on the map is a fast travel point. Traveling across the map is made extremely simple, and the best part is, loading is so quick. Forget about next-gen load times. Unlike other games in the genre, only a few seconds go by before you reach your destination. And since every point can be traveled to, you never feel too far away from anything. While something like Horizon Zero Dawn does have ample amounts of fast travel points, they add to the clutter as they are separate to all the other icons. A seemingly universally praised aspect of Ghost of Tsushima is its combat. For me, this is where the Assassin's Creed comparisons come in, at least the original through 4. Fighting in Assassin's Creed can be described as shallow, but flashy enough to be satisfying. There are some systems in place to change up weapon effectiveness, though it's pretty one note. Ghost of Tsushima is even more flashy and adds in a stylish stance system that helps you focus your attacks based on enemy types. It grants some depth and adds engagement to fights where the player is constantly switching up their attacks. It's really the animation work, the rumble in the controller each time you hit an enemy, and all the blood that sells that combat. After fights, your character is just drenched, and that is so cool. I do chuckle when people say it's the best fighting system in a game they've played because it's still quite simple. It might come down to the fact that it's visually engaging and requires active participation from the player, but there is a major problem. When fighting with large groups of enemies, you have a limited amount of control when it comes to targeting. There is no lock-on system, so you have to wrangle the character to face in the direction you want. You could be pushing the analog stick to the right, and Jin would still be facing the left, walking backwards towards a dangerous foe. As disastrous as this sounds, it's mostly just a medium annoyance in practice, which is kind of a feat for how bad it should be. Another problem is the camera's inability to properly occlude items from view. There are instances where you lose track of the fight because an object hides what is going on and you have to take your fingers off the attack buttons to spin the camera. So while there is definite praise, it's not perfect. So just a step in the right direction. When it comes to the music, it's mostly good. Story missions and battles have these great tracks to upsell the intensity of what's happening narratively. There are some really great songs for the open world activities on the map, but the utilization of the music doesn't get much better than that, as there were very few musical motifs that I could associate throughout the game. Essentially, what I just said was, sometimes the music is really good and other times it's fine. When removed from the game, the official soundtrack does provide some really great tracks by themselves, and there's even a remix album that has some fantastic renditions on there too. When it comes to the sound of the game, I think it stands out even better than the music. The ambient noises of Tsushima really root the player in the world. Hearing trees sway in the wind and leaves flutter, everything is just layered really well. I played with headphones, but others with capable setups say that the surround sound experience is a notch above pretty much any other game, so this area is a general positive. The story missions and side quests all fold in on each other. While you may crit path your experience, it's worth exploring the map. Getting to write some haiku, taking a bath, and other non-essential activities are all contextual. Every bit not only fits thematically, they actually contribute to the better pacing by slowing down and providing a reprieve from the slaughter. The story missions themselves revolve around a small cast of characters that try and push invaders off their island. The faces of all the main characters are so good that the wonky animation is immediately forgiven. It's not like the Play-Doh shapes in Horizon. The most interesting part of the story for me was the theme that I haven't seen anyone else comment on. While everyone is pointing out the obvious, the pushing out of the invaders and the honor-bound society on the island, no one's talking about legacy. At its core, this game drives home the message of legacy, the myths and the legends that are left behind. It's something that permeates through the main story and all of the side missions. It lended my experience some real weight, as the idea of truth clashing with fiction was so powerful to see happen right in front of your character's eyes. The idea that we have no control over how the stories that involve us will turn out despite our best intentions. It's too bad that the writing wasn't always up to par. I felt like there was no subtlety and some of the dialogue just fell flat. Aside from that, I really enjoyed the story that the game was trying to tell me. It was more mature than most games, but not at the level it needed to be at. Another step towards something great. The only thing left to talk about is that photo mode. Dude, it's the best thing ever. Absolutely stunning. 10 out of 10, best photo mode of all time. Plus, since there is a black and white option to play the game in, I feel bad for taking a couple pictures with that color grading option. So Ghost of Tsushima was actually a really fun game for me. It doesn't quite reach the heights to be something I'll hold dear, but it's not just a run-of-the-mill open world game. There is a soul here, and it's being unfairly judged. Maybe traditional reviewers have been burnt out on the genre, but Ghost of Tsushima is at least on par with Horizon Zero Dawn, if not right above. And that's why it's a step, or more accurately, a half step, to something greater. Hey, so I like the game so much I'm going to be trying to platinum it over on my second channel, Yellow Games Plays. come on over and check out the live stream if you don't mind minor spoilers, but I probably won't show more than Sucker Punch did in that state of play, so come check it out.